All right, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome to Google Suite Google Forms. Today's class will be hosted by myself, Bryn, with the Plano Public Library. Before we begin, I need to let you know about some ground rules that we've set for today's program. You will be muted during the class and have your video blocked. You will only see the instructor's screen. Speaking of which, there we go. At the top of your screen, you can find an exit full screen option if you need to get to other things on your computer, including Google Forms. You are welcome to ask questions during today's program. You should see an icon at the bottom of your screen that says Chat. Click on that to open the chat window. Chat is set to be seen by library staff only. Please note that any inappropriate comments will cause your immediate removal from the class. In regards to questions, we may answer you in the chat box. We might hold the question until a break or the end of the program, or we might go ahead and ask the question at the time if it is pressing. As a reminder, there is a link to the course handout in the email as well as in the chat. There is a introductory handout as well as a practice handout that you can use during and after the class. A recording will also be sent out a few days after the class. If you would like to watch today's class and then get practice after getting the recording, that is an option. And if you would like to follow along with your own Google account, you may. We will try to take it slow in case you are practicing along. And once again, if you have any questions, please ask at any time using the chat. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Bryn Kiefer, and I'm a librarian with the Plano Public Library. The goal for today's class is to learn how to create, distribute, and view results for surveys with Google's free survey administration software, Google Forms. Google Forms is a web-based application for creating surveys, forms, and quizzes accessible through your web browser. With Google Forms, you can create surveys for personal use, such as RSVPs and virtual guest books, forms for professional purposes like order forms and time off requests, or educational assessments like quizzes and course evaluations. You must have a free Google account to utilize Forms. You can either log into your account directly through Google Forms or access Google Forms through your Google Drive homepage. It is also possible to link a Google form to input results into a Google Sheets document. So be sure to check out our Google Sheets class next Wednesday at 1 p.m. if that is something you'd like to know more about. We have several objectives for today's class. We are going to explore the Google Forms interface and learn how to create, edit, and customize surveys. We will explore different views available to you as you work. We'll explore how to share surveys via email and link to send your completed survey to respondents and collaborators. And we will learn how to view survey responses and link to spreadsheets. I'll be accessing everything that we need today from my Google account. Your documents will save automatically in the cloud while you are working, so you don't have to worry about hitting save. The documents that you create will be accessible from any device with internet access in the future. All right, I'm going to switch to my Google Forms homepage, if you give me just a second. All right, you should be able to see my Google Forms homepage now. Before we get started today, let's take a moment to learn a little bit more about Google Forms. What is it? Google Forms is a web application for form creation and survey administration. You can create, distribute, and view results from surveys created for a variety of purposes. Unlike some of the other Google Suite applications, Google Forms is only available as a web application. You must have a free Google account to utilize Forms. You can set up a Google account by either using an existing email account or by setting up a free Gmail account associated with your Google membership. You can access Forms directly through its homepage, which is forms.google.com, or through your Google Drive, which is drive.google.com. Because Google Forms does not have a Microsoft Office corollary, its uses may not be as intuitive as some other apps. However, you can use your forms to build contact forms, RSVP pages, guest books, order forms, feedback forms, and classroom assessments. Are there any questions about the basic functionality of Google Forms at this time?
I don't see any questions in the chat right now.
Excellent. We will continue then. You can create surveys easily in Google Forms by creating a blank survey or using a template from the template gallery. To create a blank form from the Google Forms homepage, you need to sign into Google Forms, as we have already done here. Click the tile for blank, and a blank form will open. You can also create a blank form from the Google Drive homepage. Let me open Google Drive. You can click New in the upper left-hand corner, select Google Forms from the list, use the arrow to select blank forms or blank quiz, and a blank form or quiz will open as well. Within the Google Drive homepage, there is an additional option to create a blank quiz, as you can see here. The option creates a blank form, but enables settings that will result in survey responses being scored based on answers that you put in. You can toggle these settings on and off at any time. Sometimes you may want to work from an existing template. Templates provide a preset list of survey questions that you may wish to use. To create a document from the Google Forms homepage, we click on the template gallery to expand it. Choose the appropriate category. We have things like personal, work, and education. Select the document that you would like to create. We'll go ahead and select party invite. I saw somewhere here. And the selected template will open as a new document. You can see it includes lorem ipsum here, as well as a lot of different questions that might be useful if you are planning a party. You can add, alter, or remove these questions as you'd like, and ultimately they are just suggestions to help you out. You can also access the template gallery from Google Drive. Go to Forms and hover over the arrow and select from a template. And this should open the template gallery within Google Forms. You may also want to access documents that you've previously created or need to continue working on. You can do this once again from either Google Drive or from your Google Forms homepage. To access an existing document from the Google Forms homepage, you can go up here to organize your files in different ways. You can view them using a list view or a grid view. The list view showing smaller icons, especially if you have a long list, that could be useful, or grid view, which shows a little bit more detail about what the survey looks like. You can click this button to toggle between them. Files can be sorted by name, last modified by me, or last opened by me. Currently they are last opened by me, but we can change that easily. And now they are in alphabetical order. Files can be filtered to owned by anyone or limited to files owned by you or others as well. That's this toggle right here. Since I only have files owned by myself, then that's not going to be particularly helpful here. To open any of these though, all you have to do is select it and it will open it in that tab. To open an existing document from the Google Drive homepage, let's look at that. There are, once again, options to organize your files. So we can go to list view, or we can go to grid view and display these mini files, which are from all of the Google Suite in different ways. Once again, to open a document from Google Drive, you just have to select it from either the suggested menu or the files down below, and it will open it with a double click. And if you don't see the file that you want to open, you can easily search in the drive to based on title or other aspects of it to find your document. You can also remove files within the Google Forms homepage. I've created several blank documents and templates at this point, so I'm going to remove a couple of them. We can remove this untitled form by clicking the three dots down here, the remove button, and move to trash. Files that are removed are placed in your Google Drive's trash folder and will be deleted after 30 days, so you can easily recover files that you delete by accident. Are there any questions about creating, accessing, or removing your files?
None in the
No.
chat at this time.
Excellent. I assume that means that everyone is understanding what we're talking about. That's great. Now we're going to move on to navigation. So we'll start out by creating a new blank form. At the top of the window, you click the plus sign and it creates a blank form. Up here, you can rename your form file. So we go ahead and click on Untitled Form, and we can title it whatever we want. So we'll title it Title Test. Some of the other navigation options at the top of the screen, you can click the star to add the form to your star documents, which would be accessible from both your Google Drive and your Google Forms home pages. You can click this folder icon next to that to move the document into a folder. You can either choose an existing folder or create a new one. If you click on this corner icon, you can return to the Google Forms homepage. And at some point, the cloud icon will appear. I think we have to edit the document first. And you can see it saving. So it looks like the cloud icon is not appearing, but it would appear right about here where it indicates that all changes are saved in Drive. And that would basically say the same thing when it appears. On the right-hand side, there are some additional icons that can help you customize your theme, preview your form, and send it out. And we'll discuss these in a little bit more detail later. The Forms workspace below has three main sections that we'll look at throughout this course. We have the questions workspace, which we're currently viewing. This allows you to add and edit questions for your survey. We have the responses workspace, which lists out all responses to your survey as a whole and on an individual basis. Currently, since we have no responses here, we don't see a whole lot. We will look at what a filled out responses section looks like later. And lastly, we do have the settings workspace, which includes options for turning your survey into a quiz and changing how you collect and receive responses. Over here on the right side with the three dots, that is the More menu, which also offers several options related to your form. With the tools listed under this icon, you can make a copy of your form, move it to the trash, and more. This is where you would add other users to help build your survey. There are a few options at the bottom as well for programmers and developers. You can get a pre-filled link if there are default answers that you want respondents to have selected or entered. And we'll see what that looks like towards the end of the course, if there's time. Lastly, back in the questions workspace, there is the floating menu, as I have dubbed it. If you have a longer survey with more questions in it, it would float alongside as you scroll. This has different elements that can be added to your survey, and we'll look at those a little bit more in depth later. Are there any questions about navigating Google Forms?
No questions at this time.
Awesome. All right, let's look at titling and customizing your form to begin the process of creating a survey. First, we will give our form a title and description. So up in the left-hand corner, like we talked about, we do have the document title, which is visible both in Google Drive and Forms. We're going to go ahead and type in example survey at this time. You can see that this is duplicated down here. However, we can actually change this, the internal title to something else. So we can type in, and this, what we've typed in, this is an example survey, and that will untie it from the actual document title. We can also enter a description below, and we'll go ahead and type in, this is the survey description. Okay, now we have a number of customization options that we can use here. We'll explore the customize theme option from the menu, which is over here on the upper right-hand side using the paint palette icon. So if we click this, we can choose some different aspects of what this looks like. So we can start out by changing the theme color. If we're not using a header, then this is going to be basically a selection of different standard colors. So we can choose something a little bit more subdued or something brighter, or we can even add our own custom color. We also have a background color option below. So if you want something that's a little bit less vibrant, you can select just flat gray, or you can select anywhere from a light reddish pink to a darker reddish pink. And that's going to match up with whatever you choose as your main color. Now we can also choose a header image, which gives us a lot more options. Using the choose image icon, we can open this with a number of categories to use as your header. You can also upload your own image. Once you do so, forms would prompt you to select a portion of your image. We are not going to do that. Instead, we'll go ahead and pick an appealing looking header image from the defaults. Let's see here. I think this one looks really pretty. So we'll go ahead and click Insert. And it changes both the header at the top of the screen to this image, as well as gives us some different default theme colors to match the colors within the image, which I think is really cool. We'll go ahead and select a matching theme color, and we'll pick a different background. Let's pick this darker one here. And lastly, we can actually change the font style. We only have 4 options. We can choose between basic, decorative, and that changes all the survey titles and questions to a very fancy font. We can select formal, which is going to be a serif font, and playful, which is a little bit more of a kind of a fun font. We'll go ahead and change it back to formal. I enjoyed that one. All right, are there any questions about titles and customization?
Looks like we are doing well.
Awesome. Now that we've customized our form, we're going to move on to editing the form by adding questions and other elements. Forms will periodically save your work as you are working, so you don't have to worry about saving as you go. So let's go ahead and close out the theme menu. Now, by default, the survey starts out with a question for you to edit. To edit this question or to edit a new question, you can just click on it and input the new question. So we will put in the question, how many library programs have you attended? Questions can have a variety of kinds of answers, which we are calling question types. Questions default to the multiple choice question option, but as you type your question, it will typically attempt to update the question type to match the question. And you can change this question type if you are unhappy with it using this drop-down menu. For this question, it seems to have decided that the multiple choice option is the best type. We can go ahead and change that if we want, and we'll look at what all of these different ones are in a minute. But for now, I'll just go ahead and choose short answer. That way they can type in really whatever text they want. If you would like to add an image to your question, you can click the icon to open a new window to show that. And you have a few different options. You can upload, you can take a picture using an attached webcam, which I don't want to do. If you have a URL, you can go to that. And if you have pictures in your Google Drive, you can actually open those as well. So if I have a bullet journal picture here, I could input that. I'm closing back out. Clicking the item at the bottom of the question down here will duplicate it. So if you have created a question that you want a similar set of options for instance, you can click this and it will create a second one of it. If you change your mind, though, you can also click this trash can to delete that question. This is something that can't be reversed, so make sure you're certain of it before you do so. This toggle here will make the question required to proceed. So if this is an important question that you need answered by all respondents, you'll want to click this toggle. And the options menu down here with the 3 dots has some different options depending on the question type. Since we've selected a short answer question type, there's a simple data validation tool, which in this case means that we can basically indicate that we need this answer to be a number, and we can have it be greater than 0. Well, probably equal to or greater than 0 in case somebody has not attended a library program. And that should mean that anyone answering the survey will be required to answer how many library programs they've attended. And then they will have to put in a number that is 0 or above. So that will make sure all the responses are similar across the board. Now we'll look briefly at the different question types that we can use just to kind of demonstrate how that works. So we'll create a new question over here to work with. Looking at this dropdown, we can select short answer like we already did. This would allow a free text response, but it limits respondents to 1 paragraph or less with no line breaks. In contrast, you can also select the paragraph option, which allows line breaks within the text answer. The multiple choice option works pretty similar to familiar multiple choice quizzes, limiting respondents to 1 answer with a set of options. You can also include an other option and allow respondents to enter a short amount of text in this other field if they choose that. With multiple choice type questions, you can actually have respondents be sent to different areas of the survey as they continue onward. The checkboxes option below allows respondents to choose more than 1 option from a list. So similar to multiple choice, but with multiple answers possible. The other option is also available here. Drop downs are basically the same as multiple choice, except it displays the options in a different manner, and other is not an option here. The file upload question type allows respondents to upload files to your drive. Files are saved to a destination that you select within your Google Drive. Keep in mind that file content is not restricted, and it's not recommended to share this kind of question with those you don't trust. You can select a linear scale to allow respondents to rate your question on a scale from 0 to 10 or 1 to 5. The lower limit is going to be 0 or 1, and the upper limit can be anywhere from 2 to 10. A multiple choice grid creates a grid where respondents can select 1 answer per row. This is useful if you have several questions with the same multiple choice answers. Row order can be shuffled, and you can limit to 1 choice per column as well. So if you have several options that you need ranked in a matrix, then you can easily do that. The checkbox grid is very similar, except they can select multiple answers per row. Once again, row order can be shuffled, and you can limit the choice to 1 per column as well. Lastly, we have the date and time selections. The date one allows selection of any date, possibly including year. You can actually select here where you have, you can either choose to include or exclude the year, and you can actually include a time as well. The time question type permits either time or duration to be entered. So if you have a time of day that you're trying to identify, that would be an option. Or if you're trying to enter, say, how long it took someone to run a mile, that would be something you could use as well. Now, moving on from question type, we'll look at the floating menu. So you can add as many of these elements as you'd like to your survey. The menu will be either at the bottom of your screen or to the right of the questions, depending on how big your window is. So if I reduce this, there it goes to the bottom of the screen. And if I expand it horizontally, the floating menu is once again floating on the right side. So the plus icon will add a new untitled question to your form. It will appear directly beneath the element you last edited. If you plan to ask questions that are already included in another survey, you can actually import questions from there. We will go ahead and try to import some questions from the customer feedback template that I have opened here. So we can select as many as we want, and they will appear at the bottom. And then we can edit them as we like. Adding a title and description will add a second element similar to the form title and description that's at the top of the screen. This is good if you add a second page to your survey, which we'll look at in a second. This icon here is an image, And this one is a video. You can actually add images and videos to your survey for respondents to view and look at. Lastly, these separate sections, like I mentioned, that's going to create a second page or more pages in your survey. If there are multiple sections and multiple pages, they will be navigated with buttons. So if I want to add this section here, then it's going to actually appear below where I wanted it to. So in order to change the order of questions, I can just use this group of 6 dots icon to drag this element down. And now it is on the second section. And now we can actually see the floating menu is floating because there is enough length of the survey to actually demonstrate that. Some additional editing options, we of course have the undo and redo buttons at the top of the screen next to the send button. We can click those to undo or redo something that we've just done. So if I didn't actually want that element to be moved to the previous section or to the next section, I can just click undo and it moves it back where it was. All right. Are there any questions about all of these different survey question types or the different elements of the form itself?
I don't see any questions in chat at this time.
Excellent. Continuing on, we are going to shift gears, in order to get a sense for what a completed form might look like. So I've actually created an example survey so that we can preview and look at the responses. So going back to my Google Forms, that did not work as well as I'd hoped. Here we go. So going back here, I've created a fictionalized form with fabricated information. So this leadership program described in this form is non-existent. I did this though so I could demonstrate what all the different types of questions look like in the actual form and how response data is organized. So when we're in a form, this looks very similar in some ways to the form that we just were in. We can click this eye icon at the top of the screen to open the live form. It's described as a preview, but it actually is linking you to the form itself. So on the first page, we can see here, we have the title. It gives me the email address that I'm currently logged in as. And it also has a question regarding program expectations, which I actually have to agree to in order to proceed. It has a function called go to section based on answer enabled. So if I click agree and I click next, it goes to the candidate information page. However, if I go back and I decide to disagree, it instead goes to the final page of the form to submit. So if I don't agree to these terms, then it won't let me fill it out. So we go ahead and click next. You'll notice that some of the questions on this page, particularly these top 4 or so, have red asterisks next to some of them. These indicate that these questions are required. So you won't actually be able to click next until the required questions are answered. You'll also notice that if I go back to the actual form, the form document, most of the differences between the draft and the preview are aesthetic in appearance. So the biggest difference might be the drop-down menu, which is visible as the favorite library location, which looks like this in the actual form, as well as some of the grids where I can, so if I'm looking at the rank your abilities question, if I actually click the question, then this is what that question looks like. I choose the rows and I choose the column names. But if I click out of that question, then it shows it very similar to what it does in the actual form. Now I'm going to go ahead and fill in some fake information very quickly. And we'll click a birthday. We'll select Schimmelpfennig as the favorite library location, and I'll put some middling abilities in those areas. We're not actually going to upload a file because I don't have any on hand. And this is not a required question, so I'll go ahead and leave it blank. There is an additional page to this survey to demonstrate some of the further nuances of the form. I'll just select some answers here. And we'll go ahead and select 1 hour, 10 minutes for the travel time, which this is what a duration question looks like at the very end here. And now we can just click submit, and it tells me that my response has been recorded. And there's also a link to go back to the beginning and submit another answer. You can actually change within Google Forms what this phrasing here is. And you can actually make it so that people have to log in order to submit their response and cannot submit two responses. So those are some useful features depending on what you're trying to do with Google Forms. And we'll go ahead and continue onward if there are no questions about the Google Forms preview or the final appearance of the form.
Looks like we are good to move on.
Excellent. So we're going to go back to the application, the Google Forms document itself, to talk about sending your form. You have a few different options to do so, but in order to get to that, you need to click on this bright purple send button in the upper right-hand corner. So in order to send the form, this is what you would do if you're trying to send the form to people to fill out the survey. There's a different option for collaboration, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the first option is if you have a set of email addresses, you can actually email the form directly to those respondents. Just enter these email addresses right here and then edit the message right here. So I can send it to myself. And I can change this message to say something else. And we can include the form in the email or not. Actually, it looks like it will not let me. So there appears to be some setting that that's not allowing me to do it. But regardless, you would just click send to send that onward. You can also share the link directly. So if you have this link button enabled, you can just click this box to shorten the URL and click Control-C as a keyboard shortcut to copy that. Or you can click copy down here using this button. And it says copy to clipboard. So if I have, say, a group chat that I'm trying to send the form to, I can just copy and paste the URL and people can access it directly. There's also an option to get an embeddable HTML snippet, but that's not available because we have a file upload question here. So that is probably why it's not letting me do that in the email as well, is because the file upload makes it a little bit too challenging for HTML to accommodate. And lastly, over here, we can share this form via Facebook or via Twitter. And once you have sent out your form, all that's left to do is wait for responses. You can ask Google Forms to notify you of new responses. So if we close this and go to the responses workspace, under options, which is this 3 dots, you can go to get email notifications for new responses. And this will ask Google Forms to email me every time somebody new responds to the survey. I don't actually want that to happen, so I'm going to unselect it. All right, are there any questions about sending out the survey to respondents?
No questions at this time.
Excellent. So now we will look at what the responses look like. We're going to utilize this responses workspace to view the answers and analyze some data. You do have 3 view options within this workspace: the summary workspace, the question view, and the individual view. You also have this toggle here that allows you to decide whether or not you even want people to answer your survey. So if we select, if we turn it off, that is, then it will actually prevent new answers. So if we click preview now, it actually tells me that this survey is no longer accepting responses. So that can be a good tool if you change your mind or you're done collecting data and don't want anything else to come in and add to the results. We'll go ahead and turn this back on though for now. So we'll go ahead and look at the summary view first, which is a very useful view for looking at all of the answers, especially when you don't need to know the specifics about who said what. So if you're looking at, say, what people's favorite library location is, we can see here that there have been, looks like 9 responses to this question, and we can hover to see it looks like the Harrington Library has received 33% of the answers, which is 3, versus it looks like Haggard and Davis Library each have only received 1 response. And then over here we have Parr and Schimmelfinnick having received 2 responses each. So it breaks down your data for you and tells you what you want to know in an abbreviated format. Here's what this ranking question shows. So we can see here that most people answered 1 to their leadership abilities, but a significant amount of people answered 5, which means they have really good leadership skills. So in contrast, we have kind of an all over the board response set for organization and communication. It seems like a lot of people said that they have very strong communication skills in this fictional survey. We have another bar graph down here to indicate meeting time, which this is actually a good demonstration of when this might be particularly useful, is if you're trying to arrange a good meeting time for the most people. So based on that, it looks like the highest number of responses received was for 5 p.m. on Tuesday, which 7 people said was a good time for them. Versus some of these only have 1 respondent. So we wouldn't want to have the meeting at 5 p.m. on Monday. We would want 5 p.m. on Tuesday is much better. Some of the responses in here are a little bit interesting in how it displays it. So for birthday, it shows the year and month and then breaks it down based on the date. That could be more useful for other things than birthday. But it has some interesting ways of trying to make the data very succinct. Next, we'll go ahead and look at the question view, which might be helpful if you're trying to look in depth at some of the more popular responses to certain questions. I personally find this way of displaying information to be not super useful. It's not very intuitive. For example, if I go down here to the anything else you'd like to know, it kind of gets a little bit weird. So for instance, it tells me that this question was left blank by a couple of different responses. And also, I guess a couple of different responses registered a space or some other weirdness there. But we can easily see different answers and how they are laid out. Lastly, we'll go ahead and look at the individual view. This is more helpful for things like this, which is an application. It's important to be able to see everyone's responses individually. So, for example, here we have Stephen Strange's response to the survey. So we can easily see that he's actually listed himself as having 4 out of 5. So decent skills in 3 of the 4 qualities we're looking for this fake program. We can also look at his other responses down here. But this is most importantly useful because it puts specific individuals' answers with their names, so we can assess them easily. Okay, are there any questions about responses?
No questions at this time.
All right. So we have a few moments to take a look at the additional form options that we've talked about. So we'll start by looking at the settings workspace. There's a lot of options in here that might be useful depending on what you're trying to do. First and foremost, you can turn your quiz or your survey into a quiz by using this toggle here. That opens an entire subsection of responses. So we have here, we can release grades after each submissions or turn on a manual review option. We can have the survey tell respondents whether they've missed questions and allow them to see correct answers or not. We can make it so they can't do that. And they can actually see the point values or not, depending on how we identify that. One thing that I would like to mention, since this is a quiz option, is if you go back to the question after looking at this, I believe you should be able to change the answer key on each question and also tell how many points this question is worth. So if you're using this for an academic setting or even just trying to assess knowledge, there's some really interesting options in how you break that down. We'll go ahead and turn off the quiz for now, though. Down here, you can also change how responses are collected and protected. So you can collect email addresses with each response. You can send responders a copy of their answers. You can also turn it on so that response editing is permitted. So somebody can go back and change their application after they submit it. There's also some options such as limiting to one response, like I mentioned. This does mean that respondents would be required to sign in so that it can track who is filling out the survey. And you can also change the size, the upload file size for if you're having them upload files, which in this case, we have permitted the upload of a resume and additional documents. Of course, that file size is ranging from 1 gigabyte to 1 terabyte. So those are some pretty big files. And lastly, there's some options for how the form is displayed. You can change it so that it shows a progress bar, which could be useful if you have a lot of sections or pages. You can shuffle the question order if you'd like, which could be, once again, useful if you're having a quiz and you don't want everyone to have the same order of questions. Here's where you can change the confirmation message in this section to say something else. And you can also indicate whether you want them to be able to submit another response and whether a link is displayed to do that. So yeah, lots of cool different options that are available to you depending on what you're doing. I also did want to mention briefly the pre-filled link option, which is under the More menu up in the right-hand corner. If you click this link here, it will open your survey in a new tab and allow you to answer all the questions. So we can't pre-fill the email, but if we have a code that everyone needs to include in their survey, or if you have a specific subset of students that need to include something specific, such as like a couple of letters, like they are part of some program where they have to say they're part of it, we'll just add PPL there and call it that. That way we can actually click get link at the bottom and we can copy that link to have somebody else open the survey with those answers already selected. So if we go through to the second page, oh, this is required. There we go. We can go in here and we see that the PPL code is at the bottom there. So lots of useful options for you. Are there any questions about form options or anything else that we've covered in this course?
I don't see any questions in chat.
Awesome. Well, that does conclude today's class on Google Forms. Thank you so much for attending, everyone. I would just like to share a few more resources with you before you go. If you have a short question you'd like library staff to answer, either related to this course or really anything else that we cover, you may submit it online at any time using our Ask a Librarian service. A librarian will usually respond within 48 hours. If you do want more one-on-one help, such as a 30-minute appointment and a chance to go over specific questions, you can actually complete a Book a Librarian appointment request. Each session is tailored to your specific needs and is compatible with your schedule. Our blog, Plano Library Learns, includes book lists, program recordings, and other useful information. You can explore more business and career resources and technology tools from the associated tabs. You can also view past programs on our YouTube channel. That does include the previous courses in the Google Suite series that we are having, as well as the eventual link to our current program that we're recording right now. And speaking of which, you will receive a link to today's recording and can access our course handouts via the Google Drive at any time. And if there are no final questions before we wrap up, please take a moment to complete our program survey, which should pop up when you exit the program. We do highly value your feedback. Thanks again for joining us today. Bye, everyone.